Welcome everybody to the FileMaker Pro User Group, Dallas, Texas. This is September User Group meeting. I'm Taylor Sharp. Myself and Greg Price are our User Group co-chapter coordinators, so we're glad to have everybody here. Today we are going to have a special guest here. Todd Geist is going to be presenting to us. We really appreciate him being here. For those of you who don't know, he's probably the most premier developer out there in the world. But he does a lot of fun and different entertaining things, and so we're going to be learning some more from them about one of their special tools, Ottomatic. So it'll be fun to hear about that shortly. But we're going to do our announcements first. So our first announcements are we've had some updates on Engage. So if you don't know, Engage is the annual developers conference that we haven't done for years, and now we're going to hopefully have it down in Austin, Texas. It's going to be for 2 days, not 3 like it used to be, so only 2 days. So that means I'm sure they'll cut the price by a third, but probably not. But it is going to be close, at least for those of us in Texas, to go to Austin, so that'll be kind of fun. The hotel situation is completely different than what we've done in the past, so it means that there are a bunch of random hotels around there. We're not all in one big hotel, so it's going to minimize some of the networking that we've been used to in the past, but hopefully they'll work out some alternatives to make more of that happen. But anyway, if you haven't signed up for it, they now have a web page on the Claire site that tells you about it and lets you send in an advanced email to get the initial early bird rate, which I don't know. Someone remember the early bird rate?
$10.50, I think.
$1,050. Okay, so anyway, get signed up for the early bird rate if you're going to come, and then you got to figure out which hotel you want to be in down in the area of Austin called the Domain. Notice when you go to the Claire's website, they have this wonderful picture of Ladybird Lake, downtown Austin. That isn't where we are. We're way up north at the Domain, think Round Rock, okay? So don't get fooled by the picture. So, okay, good. Okay, well, without further ado, Todd, come dazzle us.
All right. Hi, everybody. I think the Engage thing is going to be pretty fun. It's very different because I don't think there just was a lot of uncertainty around what they normally would do, because it usually takes, they have to start the process a year and a half before they can actually put on a big Engage, big contracts at big hotels, and there just still was so much uncertainty they just didn't do it. So this is a different thing that they're putting together, and I'm thrilled because we haven't gotten together as a community in a big way in a long time. And in fact, this is the first live presentation that I've done since before COVID. So it's been a while, and I think people are wanting to get back together and do stuff in person, and so I expect this event to sell out pretty quickly. So if you're interested, I would jump on it, because I don't think there will be spots available into the fall. So I was asked about the product roadmap. So there's been a new announcement that was made. We also had Andy Lecates on our podcast, the Context podcast, that came out just a couple days ago. So that's available. You can find that everywhere you get your podcasts, the Context podcast, where we go through in detail sort of what is happening with their latest changes. The short way to say it is they're getting rid of the Claris branded stuff that was FileMaker Server. It's going to be Claris Go, Claris Server, Claris Pro. Those are going away. And there's only going to be one. There can be only one. And it's FileMaker. So the entire platform, which includes Connect and Studio, are being much more tightly integrated with FileMaker instead of the Claris product line. And the main reason for that was they just recognized that it just created an incredible amount of confusion and hesitation, and people just were not signing up for any of the Claris stuff. And so they have backtracked on that. They're making just one product base there, and it's all the FileMaker that we know and love. And they're adding things to it. They've been adding a lot. If you've noticed, the releases that have been coming have a lot of new features and a lot of new interesting stuff, a lot of bug fixes. And then what's going to be, I think, really interesting is much more tight integration with things like Claris Connect and with Claris Studio. So you'll get one platform, a part of which will be the FileMaker that you've all been using for some of our case, decades now. And then you're getting some new tools that'll come with it, which is Claris Connect and Claris Studio. So I think it was a smart move. I'm glad they did it, and I look forward to being able to just plug in Studio right into my FileMaker apps and not have to deal with any kind of migration to some different thing. Any questions on that before I jump in? It's all good news, I hope. Everybody's excited that we're getting rid of this second thing. It's like Coke Classic versus New Coke, right? It was like new Claris. Oh, that's funny. I can't believe it took me this long to come up with that. It's sort of the obvious thing. Hey, New Coke. Oh, classic.
You just needed to be in person.
I do. You know, that's the thing. I really like to be in person. I don't spend a lot of time preparing very detailed scripts in my presentations, and you'll see I have some slides which I will use, but they're mostly just a framework for me to remember what I hope to talk about. And then I'm going to just show some things, and I'm going to show you some very new things that aren't done yet, and so some things might break. But I want to have a conversation. I much prefer that to just dumping information on you. It's I don't know, it's boring. I mean, once I've written the thing, I don't really want to tell you the same thing again. I want to tell you something else or tell somebody new something. So I like conversations, and virtuals are okay, but I don't get to see people's faces like I do here, and so really thanks for having us. So let me jump into the presentation here. So I'm going to talk about Otto. How many people have used Otto? Well, you guys don't count. We've got a couple other proofies in the audience, and they raise their hands. So it's good. So not a lot of people have used it, so I get to tell people about it. So Otto is a superpower for your FileMaker server, and it's an app that installs on your server, and it does a bunch of cool things, and it's pretty popular. It's running on over 1,000 servers around the world now, so it's under heavy use and has been in the market for 5 years. So that's what we're going to talk about. I also want to mention Ottomatic, which is our hosting platform, which includes Otto. So if you want to run your own FileMaker servers, or you've got somebody else running your FileMaker servers, you can download Otto and you can get some of our goodness. But if you want the full, like how we manage servers and everything, that's going to be Ottomatic, and that is a fully managed FileMaker hosting platform with, I think, 30 data centers around the world, and we can talk more about that if there's questions. But we even have a data center in Dallas, which is unusual. A lot of the other players don't have data centers in the middle of the country. They like the coasts. Yeah, right. So we have one in Dallas, and as you know, FileMaker likes to be close. You like to keep your FileMaker close, and so that's why we have all these data centers. So Otto 4 is coming soon. Otto 3 is the current release, and I'm going to show you some of the things in Otto 3, and I'm going to show you some of the things in Otto 4, and that's going to be maybe a little confusing, but I hope that that'll be offset by the fact that you guys are the first people outside of Proof Geist to see Otto 4 and what it's going to look like, and the beta version will be dropping in the next couple of weeks, and so that will be happening. Otto does a whole lot of things, but these are the sort of some of the most popular. So automated deployments and migrations. So that is, you've got a dev server and a production server, and you do your development on the dev server, and when you're ready to move the changes, the new code, the new stuff that you've built onto your production server, how do you do that? And so Otto handles that completely, fully automates that process. So with a single button push, you can kick off that deployment and that migration, the new files are moved over and all that's handled for you. It also does receiving webhooks really easily. Webhooks are pretty important for integrations. Most apps that the companies that you're working with use, SaaS apps will have they'll have outbound webhooks that respond, that will trigger on when something happens. And so Otto makes it really, really simple to just get those webhooks right into your FileMaker system so that you can respond to those incoming webhooks. And then we're also going to look at offsite backups. So this will move it'll take the backups that you configure, or a backup that you configure, and move it to something like S3 or S3 compatible storage. So what is Otto, just in terms of like physically or virtual physicalness? It's two things. What people experience are two things. When we talk about Otto, we're talking about the Otto server. And this is that app that installs and runs on your FileMaker server. And it hooks into the FileMaker server using either the command line tool or the admin API, and then uses that to kind of automate a whole bunch of things, and then runs all the other processes it does. So it has to run on your server. It doesn't run on your desktop. You have to put it on your server. And then currently in Otto 3, we have a file called Migrator. And Migrator is a FileMaker app where people configure those deployments and migrations that I was talking about. And then they use that to kick off the deployment. But the deployment is happening on the Otto server. So the Otto server is what's actually moving files around and opening files, closing files, migrating data, all that stuff. So yeah, and so in Otto 3, the file is called Migrator. In Otto 4, we're changing the name of that. It's going to be called Auto Deploy. And so really quickly, automated deployments and migration. So this is just hopefully a somewhat simple chart or graph showing what happens when you kick off a deployment. So the Migrator file will send an HTTP request to the production FileMaker server to Otto. So Otto has a developer API. We'll look at that a little bit later. And you're just using insert from URL to say, hey, do this. You give it some JSON. And it goes, OK, I know what to do with that JSON. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the development server, make another HTTP request to the development server and say, hey, I need some clones. Make me some clones. Developer server says, OK, here are the clones. The clones come back to the production server. Otto then says, OK, I got the clones. I know what to do with clones. I know where the data is. It lives in the production files. I've got the new copies and clones. And I've got the data migration tool that FileMaker now installs on the server for you. And I can do it. I can just go ahead and do that migration for you. It does the migration, and then it reopens the files back up on the production server. So at the end of that process, the files are back open and running.
It makes backups too, right?
It does. So part of the process when it does these migrations or these deployments is it backs up the original file. So you don't have to worry about something happening. You can always go to the backups. In fact, in the web apps, there's a one-click restore. Just sort of say, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back to the last thing. And you can, just as easily as you did the migration, you can reverse that migration. Yes?
I'm assuming that you can also set it up to migrate in the opposite direction?
You can. So we talk about production and development servers because that's sort of the common case, but Otto doesn't really care what's a production server, what's a developer server. There's a server that the files are going to be installed onto or migrated onto, and that's typically production, but it could just as easily be your dev or your staging server where you're pushing those files to.
Yeah, because we'll regularly backfill,
Yes.
migrate data from production into
Yes.
staging or
Right.
dev so that we can be working on more.
That's right. Yeah. So Otto doesn't really have a concept in terms of the deployments of production versus development. It just knows about like sort of source and target. Like this is where the action's happening. I'm getting files from somewhere else and I'm putting them on this thing. So yeah.
One more question.
Sure.
The machine doing the actual migration is the server that Otto is installed on. So if I've got
Yes.
a dev and a production, it would be the production or either server?
Yes, so Otto needs to at least be installed on your production server,
Okay.
or on the server that you're going to be moving files to. It probably is also going to be on your dev server because it does a lot of other things, and And with Otto 3, you're going to want it on your dev server. Otto 4 loosens things up a little bit, where it actually isn't necessary, but you're probably still going to want it there.
Yeah, and so the implication then is that that server needs to have the drive space and the resources.
It does, and that's
So
a really
not-
important point as you get into this, because, and this is, we're getting a little advanced, but it's a conversation, so I want to just go with it. What Otto can do things very quickly. So so when you're doing a data migration or data deployment, if you have, sort of a standard, some kind of standard solution where, let's say you've got 5 gigs of data or less, you're probably going to be able to do that entire process in 15 minutes. If it's smaller, it could even be less than that. Like if it's under a gig, it'll take a minute or two to complete that process. And that's from start to done. And you'll see, I've got some light migrations here, so they'll go very fast. But the reason that it can be so fast is that we don't actually move the data. This is the critical thing. Your data, your production data, is on your production server. Once we can do these automated migrations, that's no longer the slow point. The slow point is moving the data over the network. So if you're going to use a data migration tool on your own computer, you're going to have to download that copy of your production data to your desktop. That's all the download, however long that takes. You're going to do your migration on your desktop, then you're going to transfer it back up. You're going to transfer that data 2 times. And that's going to become the slowest part of the whole process. So Otto does everything on production. So the data actually never moves off the network. It's always on that machine. And if you're using one disk, it's always on the same disk. It's never having to deal with network I/O. So it can be very, very, very fast. That does mean your production server has to be able to handle that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's got to be a beefy server.
Yep.
Where's the server, where's the migration happening, and what are the resources? So the follow-up question then is, do you do migrations multi-threaded, where you're doing multiple files at a time, or are they sequential?
So Otto 3, you can. But the data migration tool has been updated to basically consume all the RAM that it can. So we no longer think that's a good idea.
Okay.
We don't do parallel migrations anymore.
So just sequence?
Yeah, because what started to happen is people would set it up with 10. In Otto 3 you can adjust it to how many files you want to process at a time, and people would set it even as low as at the default, which used to be the default. It's now 1, but it used to be 5, and especially on Ubuntu, they would just blow out all of their memory, and it would actually kill FileMaker Server. The OS would say, you're out of memory, you can't do this. So it's now, in Otto 4, we're going to get rid of that. And so that will increase migration times, deployment times somewhat, but it's far safer. I'm talking to Claris about what they changed and whether or not that was a good change that they did. But currently, right now, it will chew up pretty much everything and get its hands on. And so on Linux, especially if you're running Linux for production, you have to use a swap file, which is virtual memory, which Mac and Windows have built in by default. Linux doesn't. Most distros that you get will not have virtual memory, and if you don't have virtual memory, it's pretty rough. Yeah.
I'm assuming it's Otto works on Mac, Windows, and Linux.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Just confirming.
Yep. And it will run on Linux ARM as well. So it runs on all the platforms that FileMaker supports. Okay, so let's do a migration here. So we're going to do a migration using Otto 3. So we're going to open up Otto 3 on Ubuntu. So this is the current shipping, what the current shipping version looks like. And you'll notice it runs on port 3030, which is one of the things we're getting rid of in Otto 4. That was a big pain for some people to have to open up another port. So we will no longer need to run on 3030 anymore. I'll just run through this UI really quickly, and then we'll focus in on the stuff. So this is configuration. You're just setting up and entering your license, a few other things. Migrations is a list of all the migrations that have happened on the server. In Otto 3, we call them migrations. Otto 4, they're going to be called deployments. There's a file manager built in where you can actually download. This is the migration backups. You can pull those out, but you can also get your FileMaker backups here too. So you can browse any of the directories that you might hope to browse, like FMS documents, a documents directory that you can reach right here and just download things. There's a nice log viewer. We have this in Otto 4 too. This, frankly, the one in the admin console is not great. So we added this because it's just very useful. You can do searching and all kinds of stuff. So you can look at the Otto logs, but you can also look at the FileMaker logs, which is nice. API keys and this stuff I'm going to leave. We'll look at that in 4. I'm going to leave most of this out. There's other things here that we can. Well, here's just a list of databases that are on the server and clients and schedules and things. We're going to focus on migrations here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my migrator file running on Ubuntu. So this is the migrator file as it exists today. And it's where we configure what files are moving from where to where and all of their information that you need to do that. So I'm gonna let's just make a new migration just for the heck of it. So I've got some servers that I've already entered into here. So configuring your servers is just entering the URLs and the administrator passwords for them. And then we'll select a migration. We'll do a new one, and we'll call it demo. We'll leave all that entry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the from server. So we're going to use the win server for that, and then I'm going to pick the to server, which we're going to do this one, the Ubuntu one. So now I've got my server set up, and then all the files that I'm going to pick will all have the same username and password. Yes.
Can you do the same server?
You can actually.
Okay,
yes.
just confirm. Thank you.
Yeah. And it is useful under certain circumstances. The tricky part is you have to have different file names.
Names, yes.
Yeah, and that can be very tricky if you've got connected files, because your file references will all be broken, and you'll either have to fix them or you'll have to use dynamic file references. But people do that. These all have the same username and password, all the files that I'm going to choose. But you can override that at the file level, which we'll look at in a minute. So I'm going to choose files from the server. And that, yeah, there we go, good. I was like, uh-oh, my internet. So I'm going to pick, I'll just pick a couple, LedgerLink, ProofCore, Zeitgeist. We'll pick 3 files. And so these are, and then so here's where you can adjust those options on a per file basis. So you can set all the different things that you would want per file. Otherwise, you're just going to go with the defaults or with, and you can also adjust things like where do you want the accounts to come from. Very useful. Usually, you want your production accounts. You don't want the accounts coming from development to come into your production environment. That way, you can have developer credentials on your dev server, and you can have your user credentials on your production server. And you can even, if you really cares, and we do have some people who do, the developers can't get into the production server. They don't have access to it. Because the data there is very sensitive. They don't have full access credentials to the production server. They only have full access to the dev server. The dev server's got a different set of data. So you can get pretty sophisticated with that. Yeah.
So would this be an option as a way to actually add accounts to a file?
You can't add accounts this way, no. The accounts have to exist. So your production, if the accounts are on...
No, I mean, so if the accounts exist in production.
Yes.
But they don't exist in your dev file.
Yeah.
For example, by migrating it with this, you are effectively adding the accounts.
You're not just adding the accounts, you're getting rid of the dev accounts. So the question was when you with the account option here, which one do you want to keep the accounts from? It's actually a full replace. So it's not adding, it's just getting all the accounts that were there. Your privilege sets have to match. So the account has to be in a privilege set. Privilege sets have to be in that file for that to work. But the accounts are completely replaced.
You're just choosing which security set you want to go, one file or the other, but you're not.
Which users?
There's not any merging, so you just, here's the security set from this one or this one, but there's no merge or anything.
It's not a merge, and I would caution the word slightly there and just say it's about the user accounts themselves. So the privilege sets are separate, and they will come over. So if you make changes to your privilege sets, they will now move from dev to production.
And
but
you
the
want that,
accounts, which you'd want, right? But the accounts, you can choose to say, I want the production accounts. And then you get the production accounts. So, so that's how it works. Let me open up, let's see, so let's do, I want to open up LedgerLink on my Windows. Here we go. So I'm going to make a change to this LedgerLink file here. Looks like we got an empty field here. Let's get rid of that field. Let's add another new field. So I'm just making a change to the new field is already in there. So I've done this demo before, apparently. Okay, new field, copy 2, right? Okay, so calculation, just make a text field. So I'm making a change. That's really what this represents. This could be all of the changes that you make to your system, whatever they are. We've made a change. I'm going to throw that field on this layout here. We'll just drag it here. So beautiful, right? We've never done anything. You guys would never do something so slow.
Never.
Okay, so we've made a change, right? So now what I want to do is I'm going to migrate this to the production server. And so let's just open up the production version of LedgerLink here, which is on, when somewhere on this list, demo, let me search, demo, maybe, there it is. By the way, I still love these little launcher files.
Yeah, they work
This is
great.
what I use, and it's just so great. So if we look at the invoices, I'm kind of just being very thorough here, looking at the invoices. This is the old test field that was there, right? That's the one that from the last demo I did clearly, right? So that's production, and then this is dev. So we've made a change, right? So I'm going to close production. If I didn't close production when the migration kicks off, it's going to close the file. So I would have to close it at some point, and it does kick people out, and it tries to kick people out for 45 seconds. And if it doesn't, it will just not do the migration because it couldn't close the files. So we have to close the files to do the migration.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's close that, and we're going to go ahead. I think I've got everything set up here. Oh, there's a couple other options. You can choose to clone or copy, or migrate or copy. So if you want to actually bring over the data from dev, which you might have like reference tables that are in the reference file that doesn't actually change, it's supposed to be the same for every time, you could do that. So now I'm going to kick this off. And if we look here on migrations, we'll see we've got one starting here. And it'll have a little progress bar. If you're not looking at the web app, this is what you see. And every 30 seconds, it's going to refresh as it goes through this. And you can see it's doing the data migrations and completing, checking permissions, doing all the things, starting to open the files. Now, these are not big files, so this doesn't take very long. Yes?
What happens if a record is locked in the dev server?
Well, they're closed.
It doesn't, you will not, so they're clones, so it wouldn't matter mostly,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
But if you were bringing over a copy, it would not have those records in it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah.
So my question, so when you kick it off, it obviously closes the production file because it has to. Does it close all of the files on the production server or just the files that you've selected to migrate?
Just the files you've selected.
Okay.
There's our new field, so just to Can I get a little applause?
Yay, happy dance.
Okay. So, and that's actually a good question. The reason is that the problems that people run into, and something we are addressing in Otto 4, is you may be migrating some files, and those files may serve as external data references to other files that you're not migrating. And you actually don't want users in those files while this is happening. Right. Yeah. So this is not something that we have built in currently. So if you have that situation, you may have to close the files first. Right. I'll get to you in just a sec there. Yeah. In Otto 4, we're going to add, like we have this option here that says, we have this option for migrate or copy. There'll be another option, which is close. And so then you can select all the files or just the files that you want closed during the migration. The other reason that's useful is because if you have schedules, script schedules that are running, they're going to hit that file that's still open, and it's going to try to run. The other files will be closed, and you've got an issue. Right. So Otto 4 will address that issue. Yeah?
Then you answered my question.
Look at that.
Because it was about the script schedules. And
Yeah.
Can you disable them and re-enable them?
Yeah, it's not. So how we're going to handle that is closing the file. That's we looked at doing just like disabling all script schedules and re-enabling them. But I think closing's better because closing solves that problem, and it also stops users from stumbling into a file before the whole thing's ready to go. So that's how we're going to address it. Yeah, good question though.
I have a question. Are there any issues with or additional steps for migrating encrypted files?
There is, and that is really just the encryption key. That's it.
Got it. I couldn't see it that far.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
It's this encryption key is what you add. The interesting thing about encryption keys is the files both have to be encrypted, so the target and source, or they both have to be unencrypted. You cannot migrate data from an encrypted file to an unencrypted file, or vice versa. And that is actually a pain in the butt, but it's very clear why that would be.
Right.
Oh, just get rid of it. Just migrate it into an unencrypted file, we got the data, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So it's a security thing, and it is something you have to add that as another one of the credentials that you see here.
Thank you.
Todd, if you have a related file to the one you're closing and replicating, that's connected in some way, do you have to just shut that down manually?
You do today, yeah, with Otto 3. Otto 4, you would just mark that as one that you didn't want to do. Now, if your file is the same, if all the files are the same on your dev server, then you could really just include them all, all the files you want in your migration. You're just doing extra migration you may not need to do, right? Yeah. That's the thing. And so if there's a lot of data, you may want to do that. And that's one of the things that you see here. You can actually, once you have your file set up, you can disable a file migration for this particular run, right? Where like I only need to migrate the LedgerLink. I don't need to migrate the others. And so that way you wouldn't have to go through the process of doing that. And if you have a file we have people migrating 80 gigabyte files. And so that actually takes more than an hour to do that. So,
Can you set it up so that, say you're migrating, 3 of your data files, but you also want your UI file closed? That's what we'll do sometimes to keep users out, because that's the only entry point for a user.
That's right.
So can you set it up to migrate certain files and close certain other files?
That will be the feature in Otto 4. It's not in Otto 3.
Okay, because that would be nice.
What you have to do is just migrate you just have copy your UI file, and hopefully it's in a state that you can copy it. This is why we're adding the feature, because it's really something that you need to do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So this is good. So this is the important, the big feature, and there's a ton of sort of, once you start doing development in this way, you end up with there's a whole new level of questions you're going to have, because you have to think about things like, okay, I'm doing work in dev, and I've got 3 features I'm working on, one of which is done, the other 2 are not done, so they're broken. Can I migrate? Well, not unless you want to break your production file. So there's ways of coding around that using what are called feature flags, and basically you have to develop in dev in a different way to enable the ability to do this anytime you want, right? So there's a whole, we could talk for days on that, but I really would love to show you some other features and some of the stuff coming in Otto 4, if that's okay. But
Question, I assume that also means that on your production, when you need to make sure that people are staying out of doing any editing on it manually before the dev, so that if someone messes on the production one and you're working on the dev and you migrate to production, and there are unexpected things, like, for example, they created a new field that creates a field ID that you reserved over in your development.
Yeah, you have to be very, you shouldn't do development on production.
You need to tell people stay out of development on it. Yeah.
So that's nice, but only in the most highly secure environments is that really going to be practical, where they're already doing all kinds of crazy things. What you do if you've got a fix that has to go into prod, you're not ready to do a data migration or a deployment, what you do is a hot fix. And that's actually not a term we came up with, it's a term in the broader industry. And it means you're making a change in the production server. And you want to do that, and you want to do that in dev at exactly the same time. Because if you don't do that, you will forget, and you will migrate the next time, and you will lose that feature. You will have a regression. So hot fix, in terms of what we're talking about, means you make the change in both places at the same time. So you don't get, now, the data migration tool handles matchings pretty well, but you can still screw it up if you don't do this. So you want to make sure that if using the same names, fields will match. Basically everything matches by name first, and then if it can't find a name, it matches by ID. Okay. And so if you get in, you can screw that up. Like, you can have a field that doesn't match by name and doesn't match by ID. It's not going to find it. You're going to have problems. Okay. How we doing? Good? Isn't this meeting together as a group? It's like, who invented this thing?
I have one quick question.
We invented
You invented? Okay. Well, you should copyright it, or like
It is copyrighted.
in-person meetings. Who thought?
Aren't you paying us the royalties?
Okay.
I am assuming that this is migrating, when migrating, an entire file,
It is.
all parts and pieces.
That's right.
Have you envisioned in the future an option where you could migrate only specific tables?
So there is a tool out there that is semi-mythological called the Solution Updater, which is similar to the data migration tool. It's a command line tool, and it is intended to patch files. However, it doesn't. There's no documentation, and occasionally there will be a story told of success in migrating, say, custom functions or layouts, but then that story is somehow lost, and it doesn't seem to. It's really a strange thing. Like, it just doesn't seem to be very reproducible.
I ask because sometimes the changes made are not to the schema in general. They're literally just data that needs to be moved for specific tables.
Yeah. So if you need to do that, the only solution is because that tool will not move data tables.
Right.
So it's going to move a whole file in terms of data or schema.
Okay.
Right? And even the other one won't help you with that because it doesn't do schema. I mean, it doesn't do data. It only does schema.
Okay.
So, so patching was what I was referring to. We're actually making changes, discrete changes to the server. And while I think that could be useful, it also, you run the risk of, well, what patches have been applied and what haven't, especially if you've got the same solution deployed to a number of customers. That can get tricky. The nice thing about doing data migrations as opposed to updating schema is your production files are your dev files. They're not some Frankenstein mix of patches that you apply to it. They are your dev files. And so there's no way to get confused about that. So I don't know, if the solution updater ever gets to a point where it could be used, I could see it being useful for doing things like, especially maintaining custom function libraries would be really great. So there's definitely use cases for it, but I don't think in deployment. I think in deployment, this is the best way. You get the dev files become the production files. There's no chance of pieces of it missing, or sometimes we get questions from people who say, I think one of my tables didn't get moved. Like, well, that's just not how it works. It doesn't do that. It does the whole thing. It's all or nothing. Okay, I'm going to shut this down.
There are a
And-
couple of questions. If
there's questions?
If you click your little thing down in the bottom right there, yeah. Go.
Yes, it's a good idea. Yeah, a couple good ones from Steven here. Humble suggestion: make the migration deployment name server identifier easy to see versus current migration. Yeah, so we're addressing that in version 4. Which let me show you the version 4 UI here. Oh, I can see, very close. Almost blew it. There, now I've got the minimize button. There we go. So that's better. Okay, so I'm going to leave version 3, and we're going to boot up. Let's see. First, let me jump to what migrations look like in version 4. Deployments. Thank you. Local. So I'm now running. I'm going to run on a.
It's been a tough name change for all.
It's tough. So the reason is that we're going to be doing, so originally we were just talking about data migrations, but we're expanding the idea, and sometimes you're not actually migrating data. Sometimes you're just installing files. Like, again, if you got a new customer and you want to put your basic templates on there, your basic starter solution, there's nothing to migrate yet. You just want to put the files there. So that's deployment. And we've got some other things which which we may get into if we have time, that that touch on this. But basically, deployment is the bigger word. It covers everything that Otto is doing as part of this process, which is deploying files from a source to a target. Part of that may be a data migration, if there are files which need to have their data migrated. But if not, it's just an install or a replace. Or something like that. So that's why they're now called deployments. If we look at the deployments tab, so this is now, Stephen, this is just for you. If we look at the GitHub repo, Stephen, it'll say that we've now named deployments just for Dolinsky.
Nice.
You got that? Good, just for you. All right. So now you can name them, which I think is a much nicer thing. And if we look at we didn't really look at this page on the other version, but we've got, so this is the results of the migration as they show up in the web app. And so you're looking at, this is what's happening. So Otto is telling you what it's doing. It's closing files. It's starting to pull the files over from the source. It's now beginning to migrate LedgerLink. And this is the output of a data migration tool here that you're seeing. And also new in Otto 4 is that we're actually getting a chunked feed of the output. So you can actually tell how long certain parts of the migration take. This really only matters if people get pretty deep in the weeds. Looking at specific types of changes to databases will take longer than other types. So this can help kind of figure out why the migration might be taking so long. You can actually see what the longest spots are. So you can go scroll through and see everything that happened. And then at the end, it will say migrating is done. It's installing. It's backing up the original files. And then all files are installed, starting to open. Boom! Yay! Done. Successful. So that's what one looks like here. So let me actually, just to see one happening. Let me. I've got. So what's really missing from the beta version, which we are pretty close to getting ready to ship, is this auto deploy file, which is being worked on by Korn and a few other people at our team. And I don't have that file. So I've just made a FileMaker file and a button, which is going to do a migration. But it's essentially kicking off one that we have configured in the new UI that's going to do basically the same migration that we just looked at. But let's just because it's so pretty, we'll look at what happens when we do this. So I'm going to kick that migration off, and it's going to open it up. And it couldn't have finished that fast.
It didn't.
Is that one right now? 10:04? No, it didn't. Didn't go. Why would it not go? This worked. This is the last thing I tested. It did work. Let's just.
It's the demo gods.
Probably. Let me just see what the.
What is it doing before we go?
we can look at this. It's kind of interesting. And so actually, let me take this opportunity to point out a couple things. Otto has a developer API, and this is intended for people to use to write their own automations. They can write their own FileMaker file that does things the way that they want to do. And so one of the things we have in Otto 4 is a really nice Otto developer API that looks very similar to the admin API and the REST API that FileMaker Server puts out. So it's exactly the same. We're using the same template to produce the documentation. So you can look at what a deployment looks at when you start a deployment, and it'll give you the example of the things that you want to that you want to make your JSON payload into, so that it does a migration, or I'm sorry, a deployment. And you can drill down into these things. I'm getting some feedback from somewhere. Hopefully that's not me. But anyway, so the whole Otto API for 4 will be shipped along with the server, and you can just click on it from this little help doc on here, and you've got your Otto API. I am not going to guess why this didn't work. This is the one I ran just before we came here. You see at 10:04, and it was the same thing. So I don't know. We can try it one more time and just see. But no, it's not working. I don't know why. Oh, I do know why. I remember. I forgot in this. So I have one other trick up my sleeve.
You did say it was beta.
I did. I'm going to run it. Let's see. I'm going to run it. I'll run the same migration with a backdoor and see if it kicks it off, just so we can see these beautiful animations. Here we go. Beautiful. So from the dashboard, we have a in progress is telling us what it's doing, and if we look at deployments, we get that happening here, and we can look at here, and we get another view of the nice thing happening. So my FileMaker script didn't work, but the other backdoor method did, and now it's successful, and this is basically what we were looking at before.
Okay.
Sweet, yeah, pretty cool. So I want to just point out a couple of other fun things here, because I don't think we're going to get to some of the other features. But we've got, in auto settings, you can, by the way, dark mode is supported here, so if you want dark mode, you can get dark mode. We've also got some other theme settings you can use. So you can change the sidebar color. You can change, you can also pick a theme color. And the other thing you can do is you can actually name your server, and you can give it an environment tag. And we can talk about, I probably won't have time to get into this, but this is actually a way to actually be able to tell from FileMaker what your environment is, development or production, because this updates the host name, the FileMaker server, and the host name is the only thing you can get from within inside of FileMaker about the FileMaker server. Get host name, you can read it. So that's what it does. And the other thing is, so you can see that down here, but because if you have multiple servers or multiple clients, you can choose a theme for each of those servers, and now it's pretty easy when you're tabbing back and forth between different tabs. This will give you a nice cue that it's what server you're on. And I like this this lime green dark mode is one of my faves. Isn't that nice? or plain.
Very Irish.
I have a question, Tom.
Yes.
So we use a 3-server model with production, staging, and dev.
Yeah.
Dev is where we can pull things apart. Staging is where we put them back together, and the customer does their QA testing.
Yep.
So in that environment, would we need 3 autos?
Yes. So Otto's basic package includes 3 servers.
Okay.
For that very reason. So
Okay.
yeah. So we don't actually sell it in less than 3.
Great.
So it comes in a 3-pack.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh, you know what we have to show though? We have to show this is something Eric worked on, and it's super fun. So let's look at that. So let's see. Okay, so this is a feature Eric worked on, which is on our FileMaker server tab. You could do things like download clones and pause and copy and all that stuff, but you can also do upload.
Oh.
And this is super fun because if you have a situation where you have like a whole bunch of files that you want to upload, you don't even have to have FileMaker Pro to do this. You can just drop them on here and click upload, and they just start going. There is a file in here that's now this is only local, so it's not having to send it very far. But yeah, once they're uploaded, they're being opened on the server. We should see them kind of pop in the background there.
Creates a deployment.
And it's actually using the same deployment process. It's just a local deployment. Or, no, local, what is it? It's a deployment from desktop. I think that's even what we call it.
Yeah.
So if we look at the view deployment, upload from Otto dashboard. So, yeah. Yeah, question in the back.
So I was reading the documentation about using APIs, and I was wondering if we were to, when we would migrate, and would we be able to capture that file and push it to a repository like GitHub or GitLab? Where would we need to pass in those credentials, or
Yeah,
how would?
so we don't, that is not currently built in, although that is something we are actively looking at. But what you can do is you can use the API to pull down the files that you want at any stage, before or after a migration. And you could put them into so you could make your own little FileMaker file that pulls down a zip archive, let's say, of the files, and then commit that to a repo. At some point, we probably will add Git to it. But Git isn't always the best for FileMaker source files, so you might also just do an S3 bucket, something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Question?
Upload, does it support remote storage?
Containers?
Containers?
It's not, Eric's going to add that feature in a couple weeks, so be nice to Eric.
What about really large files?
This does really large files, and the cool thing about this is that it's resumable. So if you upload like an 80 gigabyte file and then you close your browser, it will, and you come back later and start it again, it'll pick it up from where it's left off. Yeah. So it's a pretty sophisticated. Are these questions that are coming in, or what are these? I don't know what
Oh,
those are.
there's a chat.
There's a
Chat. I suspect, it does not surprise me at all that Stephen would have a question.
So Todd, are you set up on AWS or Azure? You said there was a Dallas you had a Dallas server, so I was just curious.
No, it's not AWS or Azure. It's a different data provider, data center provider.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Going
Because that's been our
out.
problem in Dallas, that everybody says, let's deploy it to Amazon.
So-
It's like, well, West Coast or East Coast, they both suck for
Yeah,
Dallas.
so no.
There is a local zone here, but it's expensive.
Automatic.cloud. And here is our host. Here's
Oh, there we go.
Here's our data
Nice.
center. So there you have
Okay.
Dallas, DFW. Yeah. And we've also got Atlanta's. But we've got Miami. We have the middle of the country pretty well solved.
Is that Hawaii over there?
We do have Hawaii. Yeah. We have all over the place in terms of where they are. So, yeah.
Impressive.
And so here you can see these little green, the ones that are kind of animating are the ones with the lowest latency. So if you navigate to this map, you will see what are the three best regions, the three best data centers from where you are. It's approximate, but it's pretty good. So from the 21 milliseconds from where we are right now, only 40 milliseconds over to Atlanta, 45. If you go over to the West Coast, it's still pretty good, 50. But 50. These are all pretty good, actually. Dallas looks like, which is probably why you can survive here, because these aren't too bad. But yeah, so anyway, that's that.
What is South Africa? Just curious. How about
Johannesburg or something?
Yeah, what's the latency? 312 milliseconds. Yeah. So every automatic server comes with Otto. You don't need to buy it separately. So it's just part of it.
You want to show API keys?
I do. What I'm gonna try to run through pretty quickly is setting up a webhook to send tasks whenever a status changes in the project management app that we use called ClickUp. I don't know if you people are familiar with that, but in ClickUp we can set up an automation where we can set up a trigger that new automation when status changes from any status to any status, we are going to run a webhook, which is one of the options here.
Call webhook.
And what it's going to want is a URL. So the question is, how do I get a URL to send this task to FileMaker? So I'm going to jump over here to Chrome, I'm going to go to, let's see, what do I have up here? Let's open this. So I've got a very simple file here. It's got it's got one table, webhook test, payload and channel, the only two fields that are needed for an integration. And then it has a script called auto receiver. And the only thing that script needs to do is basically just send back a JSON response that says success true. And then the other thing is this layout auto receiver has to exist. And that's pretty much all I need in my FileMaker system to be able to receive it. So now I just need to get a URL that will connect us up. And so the way we do that is we go to webhooks, and we're going to use this new register button here, and I'm going to choose webhook test. And what it's asking for is an API key. So Otto also handles API keys, which gives you a stand-in for your credentials. So you don't have to put your credentials into your third-party app or your webhook connection. So I'm going to create an API key for the file. I know the password is admin. Whoops, the label is going to be demo admin. Created the key for me, and then it's got a URL already set up, and I want to give it a channel. So the channel is the thing that's going to differentiate each webhook you're building into your server, or into your app, really, into your FileMaker file. So we're going to do, we usually like to do ClickUp, because that's where it's coming from, task, status, updated, right? Something like that. That's our channel. And we register that. Now we've got that, right? And so if you look at our file here, channel is what that is going to be. That's going to be when the webhook comes in, it's going to be filled out with that value we just typed. And the payload, whatever the thing's sending, is going to show up in payload. So we can test this right from within Otto. So we can view and edit. We can send a webhook right from here. We can just test. It says success true, yay. And if I look at my FileMaker file, there we go. We got that message, right? So now we know we have a functioning webhook. We're pretty good. So the last thing we have to do is we can just copy this URL. We go back to ClickUp, and we paste it in here, and we create. And that's it. So now, when our automation is set up, let's see, I want to stage this a couple different things here. So that is gone. Notice we have the number of times this has happened. Also on the dashboard, it shows you the number of webhooks and how much data has come in and all that stuff. Let's go back to webhooks, and we will go to ClickUp, and we'll drag a task to a new channel. And look, now we've got two. So it obviously received it. We got here. We got two. It's got a second record. So there's the stuff. So yeah, super simple, right? Just like, because you need to be able to receive webhooks. It's such a common thing. We want that to be so simple that it's just ridiculous. So the only thing you really have to do is now come in here and write a branching script based on that channel. So you're just gonna, if the channel is ClickUp task updated, go call a script which does whatever you want to do in response to that channel, to that webhook coming in, and that's pretty much it. Now, one more thing to say about webhooks is we have this thing called SimpleQ, which is a free tool which takes us to the next level, which is basically it gives you one file you put on your server which receives all webhooks, and then you can attach files and scripts to that file, to those webhooks that are coming in, and it just gives you one place to stream everything through, which turns out to be really useful in some situations. And with Otto 4, you can just install SimpleQ on your server with one button. You click it, and I'm not going to include the demo files in this case. I'm just going to deploy, and we're going to get SimpleQ installed on your server. SimpleQ is free, and it's available on GitHub. But we're adding it to Otto, and we're going to be adding other files and utilities that you may want on your server. And you'll be able to add your own. So if you have a set of files you always use for a customer, you can just start by just say, install our base set. Give me a new server, install a base set. And that's that. Then I click the launch button, and there's SimpleQ's opened up. So it's now installed on my server. So just a couple quick things. Otto 4 will only support 19.6 and later. 19.6 is kind of a sharp edge in the FileMaker deployment, or server version errors. There's a lot of errors There's a lot of things you can do with 19.6 that you can't prior. And so it's really, I believe, if it isn't now, it will very soon be the oldest supported FileMaker version. So I know that's kind of crazy for folks who are still stuck on earlier versions, but that is the case. So there's a discount code that you can use to get 20% off of anything at our store, including Otto. I think that was the last slide.
Thank you.
And your Auto 3 license will transfer. So
Your Auto 3 license will transfer to Auto 4 when it comes out. Yeah, it's not going to be an upgrade price. It's just it'll work with Auto 4. You'll deinstall Auto 3, use your license with Auto 4, and it'll just work like that. Auto and the website for Auto is autofms.com, and here you can see the pricing. Here it is there.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all the time. I could go on about this for a long time. Auto is a foundational piece to how we think about developing in FileMaker, because what we noticed a number of years ago is that the server is becoming the center of how you do FileMaker, with server-side scripts, perform script on server, with the APIs that are there, the REST API, the OData API. It's just becoming really important. It used to be, back in the day when we were starting, you could develop. I remember the first time I deployed on server, like I had been working in FileMaker for like years, and then just doing local hosting or whatever, and then I put it up on server and some things broke, multi-user didn't work. I
Why
had to
is it
learn
so
some
slow
things.
now? What happened?
Right? So, but really, we think server is kind of the center. Like you want to start on server because that's where you connect to the rest of the ecosystem. That's where you can receive webhooks. That's where you can build web apps coming off of it. That's where the app ecosystem is. It's out there in the cloud, whether it's the public cloud, Ottomatic, or your own data center connected to the cloud. That's where it is. And so Otto is kind of that base layer that we put. Handles offsite backups, handles our webhooks, handles deployments. There's a bunch of other features that are coming down the pike that we'll be adding to that. So it's pretty key. Any questions?
Thank you, Todd. We appreciate you coming. I'm excited about it. I haven't been using it, but I am very interested. I'm going to be buying one this week.
All right,
so
great.
I appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. We'll be back next month. We're going to do a little FileMaker history next month. So I'll be teaching next month's session. So we'll look forward to seeing you back then. And I think we're ready for lunch.